Where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Breaking tonight, The Sun has reported on its front page that the BBC presenters at the heart of the sex pics scandal broke lockdown rules to meet another young stranger. And the paper has also been told by a different youth that the presenter sent them creepy messages with kisses and love heart emojis when they were just 17. Meanwhile, the Beeb's Director-General, Tim Davie, broke his silence on Radio 4 earlier, defending the broadcaster's response to the sex pics allegations, despite only confronting the presenter about the claims last Thursday, a whopping 7 weeks after the initial complaint. And I still don't think that Davie has spoken to the star involved. Take a look at this.
The BBC, as you know, Sarah, is often in the midst of quite painful and difficult affairs and storms. And I think one thing I would say is these are clearly damaging to the BBC. It's not a good situation. And under my leadership, we will absolutely be as transparent as we can.
Although you could argue that it wouldn't be The Sun doing the running on this story, it would be the BBC if the processes had worked properly.
Well, best-selling biographer Tom Bower worked for the BBC for 26 years. He joins me now. Tom, does this reflect a failure of BBC management?
Absolutely. It reflects the failure of Tim Davie himself. And I thought that in the interview today, he betrayed exactly why it's gone wrong, because he talked about pursuing the process. And the whole problem with someone like Tim Davie, who's never made a TV or radio programme in his life, is just a Coca-Cola salesman, is that he doesn't understand that television and running a huge journalistic operation like the BBC is all about individual decisions. It's about taking initiative. It's about thinking out of the box. But Tim Davie is a man who believes in ticking the box, in pursuing process. And that is why, when in May they were confronted with the first time with this problem, all they did was make a quick phone call, send an email, tick the box and parked it. And that is exactly the sort of problem that people like Tim Davie have created with the BBC. Not only the BBC, it's the banks, it's the civil service, everything. Tick a box, go through the process and think you've done your job, you've covered yourself. But what's really missing in the BBC is personal initiative, is genius, is artistic creativity. And that is what people like Davie have crushed. So I see this moment now is not just a matter about the presenter and his fate, but about the fate of the BBC. That someone like Tim Davie is the wrong person to run a creative journalistic organisation. And I hope that at the end of all this, it isn't the fate of the presenter that matters, but the fate of the BBC and Tim Davie himself, because he's just the wrong person to lead the corporation.
Well, I think he proved that during the Gary Lineker Match of the Day drama, in which Davie looked like a passenger in that story.
Well, not only a passenger, but because he's not a programme maker, he didn't understand when he rightly decided to reprimand Lineker that he then didn't think, well, what shall I put on the air next Saturday? Because he's not a programme maker.
And also, he didn't look to have studied Lineker's contract before suspending him.
But the whole problem is that when I was in the BBC, the Director-General and the people who ran the programme would go down to the coalface because that's where they used to work. They understood how you make programmes, what's the quality of people. But the quality of people in the BBC at the moment, they can't commission good drama, there's no comedy, current affairs and the news is very pedestrian. That's why GB News is such a breath of fresh air.
Well, indeed. I mean, we've seen EastEnders lose millions of viewers.
Exactly. The Daily programme loses 12% a year.
Yeah.
And that's Davie's fault.
And he lets Ken Bruce go. Ken Bruce had the biggest audience in Europe, not just the UK. And he goes off to commercial rival. Can I ask you about the alleged star at the heart of this? Why are they keeping stum? Why haven't they held a press conference?
Well, you know, the person probably thinks they're innocent, and he's got probably a crisis manager who says, keep your head down.
Right, their advice would be, you've not broken the law, would be maybe their defence. You've just been...
Look, for that particular person, it's clearly a huge tragedy. I think the persecution now could possibly push this person to suicide.
Right.
I think they'll be pretty careful. I think that it's been blown up by The Sun for their own reasons, by Sky because they hate the BBC, and the real fault is that Tim Davie didn't take control right at the beginning and make it quite clear that the BBC has got credibility in all this.
Now, what's this about Meghan Markle, who is the subject of your best-selling new biography, returning to Hollywood, returning to the big screen?
Well, last week we talked about how it was the week from hell. She had absolutely no idea what she was going to do. So in reply to that, this week, what her publicists have come up with is that tomorrow in California, LA, they'll be nominating who's going to be for the next month's Emmys. And Meghan is hoping that her Netflix series will be nominated, and Meghan also hopes that she might be named as one of the judges to award a prize. She's looking for some way to come back into Hollywood. And then they leaked this ridiculous story that Kevin Costner wants to cast her in a new version of The Bodyguard. So suddenly Meghan returns to Hollywood, where she never was in the first place. But somehow she has to feel that somehow she's wanted. That's her story this week.
Do you identify cracks in the royal marriage?
Which crack? Which
well,
royal
because
marriage?
if you see the couple, Harry and Meghan, pursuing separate careers slightly, talk of a solo documentary for Harry in Africa. Meghan goes back to Hollywood. Does this reflect a growing distance between the two?
No, that's a modern marriage. I mean, just people have different interests. I don't think there's any. So far, I haven't seen the evidence. And all those people who are on the Twitter sphere who say they're about to divorce and all the rest of it, I want to see the evidence first.
There you go. Well, evidence is what it's all about. We have the evidence of a brand new Johnson. Boris
We
and Harry
do.
have had a baby, which is wonderful news. Do you think...
For all the other Boris Johnson children.
Exactly. I mean, we won't speculate as to how many kids he's got, but congratulations to Boris and Carrie, their third baby together, Frank Alfred Odysseus Johnson, or Frankie for short. Listen, he's a proper family man now. Has he found domestic bliss, do you think?
No. I don't think so. I think that he is completely conflicted. I think he is terribly unhappy. He wants to find a way back into politics. I think he's landed himself in the most dreadful situation, but he doesn't know how to get out of it. And so making babies is one way, but it's not the way for Boris.
He's got money, which is one problem solved.
Yes, but the problem with Boris is, even if he earns £2 million, he'll spend £3 million. So he hasn't got money in the long term. What he wants to do is get back into Downing Street, but that's going to be a long, long time in coming, and it's got nothing to do with his marital bliss or not at the moment. He's a tragedy for himself and for the Tory party, the Tory government, and that is really, for those who wished him well at the outset, it's a terrible, terrible, sad moment to be.
He will continue to make money, but do you think he seeks career redemption at some point?
Absolutely.
Is his career unfinished business?
Absolutely. I mean, he feels knifed. He feels betrayed by Rishi. He feels betrayed by all the people. But in the end, of course, we keep on saying this, he's the architect of his own misfortune. But I do think that he thinks, and I think he might still have a chance in some years' time coming back.
Tom, you are a top, perhaps the top investigative journalist in the country. When do you think the name of the alleged BBC star will drop?
Sometime in the next 7 days, but I wouldn't imagine it tomorrow.
OK.
There's too many laws of defamation and the rest. And the fact that The Sun doesn't dare name him shows exactly the problem.
Yes, brilliant. Tom, great to have you in the studio. My thanks to best-selling biographer Tom Bauer.